Hello, and thank you for joining InfoTex for this movie presentation. Find our tour page for upcoming webinars and workshops, and movies for most of our past webinars. That's tour.infotex.com. Please know that at the end of this presentation are several legal disclaimers. These disclaimers explain the links shown on your screen. And now, it's our pleasure to introduce you to our webinar moderator, the Code Curator and Special Envoy from the SEAM, Michael Hardkey. Michael?
This movie is meant for directors of community-based banks. It's about your role in a very important cybersecurity process. It's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of when. Our presenter is Dan Hadaway, who speaks regularly to boards of directors and has been working in information security since the 1980s.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, directors, for joining us today. The fact that you're willing to dedicate part of your very busy schedule to the notion that it's a matter of when, not if, means a lot to your information security officer. And so it does really boil down to the fact that we're now in a situation where sometime in the future someone could make a mistake in your bank that, if not handled properly, could affect our reputational risk. But the good news is that I've been in the business of helping organizations respond to incidents since the year 2000, and the one thing we've learned over the years is that if you do have a good incident response process in place, you can actually turn that lemon into a lemonade. And as a director, you should realize that we have a plan in place that is really based on the policy that you've approved. And, we're going to be ready for that incident. We're going to be ready to turn that lemon into lemonade. We exercise that plan in what we call incident response tabletop tests. And so if there is something bad that happens technology related, we call that an incident. We practice as a management team on how we're going to respond to that incident. And the plan that we practice is really the tool that we use to enforce the policy that you're approving on an annual basis. And really, the policy has some very, very important components to it, all centered around a classification structure. Your bank might not use this one, but most community-based banks are now kind of reducing their incident response classification to a simplified three-tiered structure, really centered around whether or not we need to notify our customers, which is what we would call a disclosure incident. And so the good news is as a director, you're not really going to be concerned with the negative incidents or even the security incidents. They might be reported to you in an aggregated form in your annual report to the board, but it's the disclosure incident that we need you to be prepared for. We need you to understand what your role is going to be in a disclosure incident. And so your policy really starts off with saying, hey, there's no such thing as 100% security. And so when something happens, our first priority in every incident needs to be to protect our customers. And as a board member, hopefully that's your primary role, is to make sure we stay focused on that priority. But then beyond that, the policy, establishes that management's going to, and follow the law, and we're going to notify customers per law and per regulation. The incident response team that's been created as a part of that plan is going to keep the board informed appropriately. And again, we don't need you to wake you up in the middle of the night for, any incidents probably, but if you are going to get woke up in the middle of the night, it's going to be the top priority incident, those incidents where we've breached customer information. We think there may be a potential for misuse, and therefore we're going to have to notify our customers. I mean, even then, hopefully we're not having to wake you up in the middle of the night, but we might need to assemble the board on a Sunday or, on a holiday. Then the policy requires the management team to create a plan and of course it establishes the classifications that are going to be used to implement the plan. And then probably the most important part of the policy is that the incident response team will test that plan regularly. And these tests are very important. We need everybody on the incident response team at the test. It should exercise a scenario that would lead to notifying our customers. I mean, we can exercise other types of scenarios like ransomware or an availability incident, say, or, something, maybe an account balance is shared or whatever, where we don't have to notify all of our customers. But at least one of the scenarios in each year's test should require us to notify our customers, because that's what crystallizes all four corners of the bank. It's when even the board has to become involved in an incident response. The tests also show us, how to use the tools that we've been creating in order to monitor for technology risk and that sort of thing. And then finally, the test should also exercise the policy element of we need to notify the board. And so, you might actually have come across an incident response tabletop test, maybe because somebody called you and said, hey, this is a test, but we want to tell you what we think's happened. We want to propose our course of action, etc., so that we can have already practiced that part of the incident response as well. Something you need to know as a director, but the plan also, due to regulations, requires us to notify our federal examiner, and the ISO might contact your federal examiner even if you do not need to notify your customers. The regulation is that you could have an incident that affects customer information, but because there's no potential for misuse, you don't have to notify your customers. Well, in those cases, we still want to notify our federal examiner, because we want to make sure the examiner agrees with the notion that we don't have to notify our customers. It's a lot easier to get that agreement up front, A, but B, it also helps us legally if we've got a federal examiner agreeing with our decision not to notify our customers. Meanwhile, the BSA officer will probably file a SAR in the types of incidents that go to the board. I can't say that for sure because the Bank Secrecy Act keeps secret when they're going to file a SAR. But another thing to realize is that the plan also leverages the insurance coverage that your CFO is hard at work trying to figure out how to acquire it and what amounts to have and that sort of thing. And just so you know, I've seen tabletop testing deliver information back to that CEO about the types of coverages that we have and what works, what doesn't work, proactively. I mean, why wait until we're in a real incident to figure out that we don't have the right insurance coverage? And let's face it, when we're in a cybersecurity incident, we're going to need to know what our deductible is versus what it's going to cost to notify all our customers, and then what's it going to cost to provide credit monitoring. Is that going to be covered by our insurance beyond the deductible? And then, if the insurance does coverage forensics, do we need to use certain forensics providers? Who are they? Do we have their phone numbers in the plan? That sort of thing. So it's good that the board understands this. And then one of the most important parts of the incident response plan is that it gives birth to two items that you might have already seen because they're probably in the acceptable use policy that you approve on an annual basis. And that is, two elements that actually have been given birth by the incident response plan, which is we want to teach everybody in the organization what we mean by user containment and what we mean by broadcast awareness. And so user containment is just simply what we need to do when we grow suspicious. And so, if we think we just clicked on the link, the first thing we want to do is contain that incident. Everything else comes second. Usually, user containment is just simply a matter of if you have a laptop or a phone or a tablet going into airplane mode, or if you have a computer that's plugged into the network via a cable, disconnecting that cable. It's that simple. But unfortunately, not everybody knows that. We want to make sure not only is that in our policy, but we're teaching everybody, including board members. User containment is how we make sure that whatever damage has been caused doesn't spread any further than it's already spread. But then beyond user containment, we now have the need to broadcast awareness. Awareness is 9/11 said a battle. If we can make everybody aware of the fact that there might be an incident occurring, we're going to respond to that incident in a much better fashion. We might even be able to thwart it from causing any damage. And so the way broadcast awareness works is, we first want to start off reminding you that first you need to contain the incident, disconnect from the network, right? But then beyond that, we encourage users to get with their supervisor, explain what happened, and then the supervisor and the user will decide who is the appropriate everybody. Okay, and so if, we took a call and we accidentally gave out an account balance, maybe what we need to do is we need to contact the customer, or maybe we need to contact the ISO, or, who knows, who should we contact? If it's, somebody came into the branch and tried to get access to the data center, we're going to want to contact everybody in at least the geographic area of that, branch. Maybe even some of our competitor banks might want to let them know that, hey, somebody's trying to pose as a vendor to get access to a data center. Or, if we think we just, clicked on a link because, boy, that was a good phishing message, maybe we should let everybody in the organization know, hey, this might look like a legitimate message, but it's really a phish. Once we've let the appropriate everybody know, then we need to inform the ISO. And really, I like to say then and only then we need to inform the ISO. And the reason why I stress and only then is because way too often what happens in practice is that somebody, and we're all busy, right? But, we'll click on a link, well, darn it, that might have been a phishing test. And so then we'll forward the email message to our ISO and then go on about our day. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to contain the incident and then decide who the appropriate everybody is and then inform the ISO. If we're just informing the ISO might be on vacation, the ISO might be in a meeting, the ISO might be watching an Infotex webinar, and it could be minutes, it could be hours before the ISO says, hey, user, contain that incident, and then we'll talk, right? It could be days. And so we need to make sure everybody in the organization knows that only after we've informed the appropriate everybody should we then bring the ISO in. And the ISO will actually then decide whether this rises to the level of a emergency incident response team meeting. And really, it's the incident response team working with the ISO, the information security officer, that decides whether or not we should notify the board, whether we should, contact law enforcement or those forensics people or the insurance company, or, ultimately, do we need to notify our customers, and should we have talking points ready for the media, right? It's the incident response team working with and at the direction and leadership of the information security officer that actually works those scary incidents and decides when or not to bring you in. Which brings us back to your role. Every year you get to improve policies, right? And I'll bet, I could be wrong, but I'll bet when that acceptable use policy comes to your desk that you've looked at, 15 years in a row now, maybe what you do is you look for the new stuff in the policy and, you try to get a feel for what's new or whatever, and then you say, yeah, I can approve that policy. But your incident response policy, that's one that, first of all, should be written nice and concisely. You should be able to get it down to a page or a page and a half. And if your information security officer doesn't have it there, maybe that's one of the questions you ask. But you should reread the policy in its entirety every year so that you understand what you're directing your management team to do when and not if that terrible or scary or, reputation risking event occurs. And then I feel like there's one other thing you really need to do from a reading perspective as it relates to your role, and that's to focus in on the results of those incident response tabletop tests. And every tabletop test should come with a postmortem review, and that really should be what's presented to you as a director. And there should always be an action item section of your postmortem review, unless you had a terrible tabletop test because we didn't learn anything. And you want to make sure that those action items are being met. Now, that's just kind of the preparatorial part of your role. What we really need to talk about is your role when it comes to being in the actual incident, when you get the call. And hopefully it won't, but that call could come in the middle of the night. And what you need to realize is that your role should be to help calm the team down. Um, a while back, I haven't run into this recently, but there was a time when, I've been involved in incident response, by the way, since the year 2000. And there were several times early on when we're still trying to figure this out, when we were more frightened by an incident than we are today, maybe. But I've been in meetings where board members were using language that I was very surprised could come out of their mouth. And that was not the role that the board should play, right? The board should calm us down, not freak us out. And so, as a director, you have the luxury of being at a bird's eye view. And I've got an analogy I hope you'll bear with me on, because I feel like this analogy really kind of helps illustrate what your role should be during an incident response, and really when it comes to establishing the security culture as well. But here's my analogy, okay? If you've ever skydived, you'll know what I mean. But I've jumped out of an airplane before, and I know what it's like up there at the bird's eye view, okay? And it's not like riding in an airplane either. Because what happens is you jump off at 12,000 feet. If you jump off at 12,000 feet, you're going to free fall for about 30 seconds. Now, I feel like that part of my analogy makes a good metaphor for what the ISO is probably going through when, the ISO experiences one of those incidents that's going to result in the ISO, their information security officer, contacting the board. But let me tell you, once you pull the cord on the parachute, and the free falling's great. Don't get me wrong. The adrenaline rush that comes from the free falling is why, skydiving is so, loved by skydivers, right? But once you pull the cord on the parachute, it's even more amazing than the adrenaline rush of the free fall. It's just so quiet. And then you have a chance to just kind of look around, and you can see far more from the bird's eye view than you can from the ground. And, you might not be able to see the details, but you can spot the relationships. And up there, it's calm, it's quiet, you have time to think, and guess what? At least when I was up there, you start asking the right questions. And that's really your role as a board member during an incident. Keep calm. Try to see the relationships. Try to ask the right questions. And doing this, by the way, will not only help out an incident response, but it will also help establish the right security culture. Now, I know what you're probably thinking now, like, right questions, right security culture, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? That's a little bit more than I thought I was going to have to learn how to do. But the answer to these two roles, asking the right questions and establishing the security culture, are actually related to each other. In other words, asking the right question leads to the security culture. Now, establishing that security culture is really a whole 1 hour talk I've given in other contexts. 4 years ago, I made waves at several banking conferences by establishing what we call the 7 characteristics of a security culture. And I think the waves came from the fact that I stated that it starts at the top with you, and that your ISO should be coming into every board meeting, and the board should be very engaged. If the board is not engaged, you don't have a security culture. And so guess what? It's great, because you as a board member are watching this movie, and so I feel like that takes a certain level of engagement. You're really proving to me as an auditor that you've established somewhat of a security culture in your organization. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the security culture, but I want to turn to, and really drill down on the board engagement part, because I feel like that's the most important part. And you're up there at the bird's eye view where it's calm and quiet. So, do you know what the answer to this question right here is? In your bank, do you know that one breach can bring the whole bank to a halt? And really a question I have for you is, would you allow that on the loan side of a bank, right? Would you allow one delinquent loan to bring the whole bank down? I would hope not. And so let me take my metaphor further, because when I jumped out of airplanes, my number one concern was, does that parachute work? Now, I didn't learn how to parachute. I did what's called tandem jumping, where I was connected to somebody who was a professional skydiver, and I had to trust that person a lot, but I'm not a very trusting person, so believe me, I had a lot of questions, and most of my questions surrounded, does that parachute work, right? Well, incident response is the bank's parachute when it comes to cybersecurity. So my question to you is, do you know if incident response is working in your bank? Because what I've already talked about, how you can know that, you have to read the results of your post-mortem review from your incident response tests. And the way we make sure that one breach does not break the bank is by proactive incident response planning. I mean, we all make mistakes. It's how we respond to the mistakes we make that usually separates good businesses from marginal businesses. Which brings me back to your role. Your role really can be boiled down to asking the right questions. And when you say, well, what questions should I ask? What are the right questions? I would suggest that you think about the 7 characteristics of a security culture. And as a board member, you should be asking management and often yourself these questions. 1, are we engaged as a board? The good news is you are watching this movie. But does the board know how to ask the right questions? 2, do we see security as a customer service, or do we see it as an inconvenience to our customers? 3, what is our relationship with our examiners and auditors? Are we fighting them, or do we see them as partners? 4, does management participate in training and exercises, or do we exude by our actions that cybersecurity is really not that important? 5, are we ready for our audits, or are we scrambling at the last minute to pull everything together? I'm here to tell you that as an auditor, I present to boards a lot, right? And the one question you should be asking me is, hey, were we ready for this audit? That is a good question. 6, do we wait to be told, or are we organically managing risk? Are we happy? Let's just take the cybersecurity assessment tool. Are we happy to maintain the minimum level of maturity on the residual risk side, a baseline for most community-based banks? Or are we trying to get to that next level? If you're a bank that says, yeah, we're at baseline, but we're starting to identify the evolving statements that we can start implementing now, then number 6 is being achieved. And then finally, number 7, are we encouraging our team members to tell us when they think they've made a mistake? When the user has clicked on that link, or when the user, sees the cursor moving on the screen, but they don't have their hand on the mouse, do they feel comfortable to get with their supervisor and inform the appropriate everybody and start the process of broadcast awareness? Does management know how not to beat somebody up for confessing that they just clicked on the link? Now, do you want to know the right question to ask when it comes to making sure that the parachute works? I mean, I had to see for myself that the parachute was working, right? I mean, especially the first time I did the jump. I had to know that that parachute was working. And maybe you should too. We're encouraging our clients to bring at least one director to the tabletop test. It'll open your eyes. I'm telling you, it will open your eyes. You'll learn a lot that you can take to your other businesses. But more importantly, it'll close the circle of awareness training. It'll really help make us feel confident that the board understands their role in incident response. Which brings me to the number 1 fundamental question that you should always keep in your arsenal of questions. And it's the one question that crystallizes management's awareness. It's the one question that ties all of your questions together. In fact, if you've ever been put on the spot and you need to ask a question that will seem brilliant in almost every instant, especially during an incident, by the way, it's this question. This is the question that you can always pull out. How does this protect our customers? How does this protect our customers? Because when we're in an incident, our customers are watching. And they're watching us as we make a fundamental choice. We can either protect our reputation or we can protect our customers. And our customers are smart. They've been through this before, right? I mean, unfortunately, almost every community has had at least one local hospital have everything breached. So our customers have received the letter. I mean, a lot of our customers are veterans, right? Some of our customers work for the federal government. Everybody in the federal government's been breached. But we all, or at least most of us, saw what happened in the EQUIFAX breach, right? And when, and not if, we screw up, we want our customers to see that unlike EQUIFAX, we value their safety over our own needs, over our own reputation. That and that alone will turn lemons to lemonade, I'm telling you. Our reputation is based solely on the fact that we put our customers first, that we protect our customers, not our reputation. Protecting our customers is indeed protecting our reputation. It's that simple. And doing that, making sure that protecting our customers is the top priority, that's your role in an incident. And it might be a lot easier said than done. But if you can trust in it, if you will help your management team understand that protecting the customers is protecting our reputation, you will actually help your management team turn what could have been lemons into lemonade. I've seen this again and again. I have clients who tell me that they've got kudos from what started off looking like a terrible situation. They got kudos from their technology incident. That's turning lemons into lemonade. Most importantly, the fact that you were willing to spend time watching this movie tells me, and I'm an IT auditor, by the way, and we look for, key indicators of the culture. And the fact that you're willing to spend this time watching this movie tells me that there is board engagement, and your information security officer really wants to thank you for that. Board awareness is the parachute, right? It's the control that just may save your bank when and not if an incident occurs. So thank you very much.
For an archive of all of our training movies, please go to movies.infotex.com. Thank you for joining us today.
When you view an Infotex webinar or movie, you do so with 4 caveats. First, you're agreeing to the terms posted at the web page listed on this slide. Second, our lawyers want you to know that what Infotex presents is often time-dated or about new trends, regulations, or guidance, and therefore we cannot provide this material with any warranty whatsoever. Thirdly, material provided with Infotex webinars and movies is copyrighted. You keep the copyright to material customized to your organization, but Infotex reserves the right to use the material in other engagements and boilerplates. See our transfer of copyright agreement at the webpage listed in this slide. Finally, those who view our webinars or movies may be added to an email mailing list. If you do not wish to receive notice of additional educational opportunities, please accept our apologies and please opt out at the web page shown on this slide.